Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Natalie MacLean is the author of Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Depression, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. This episode was guest hosted by Julie Chavez, who is the host of Ask a Librarian podcast, and also the author of the upcoming Zibby books title, Everyone But Myself. Natalie MacLean's previous books, Red, White, and Drunk All Over, A Wine-Soaked Journey from Grape to Glass, and Unquenchable, A Tipsy Quest for the World's Best Bargain Wines, were each selected as one of Amazon's best books of the year. She was named the world's best drinks journalist at the World Food Media Awards and has won 4 James Beard Foundation Journalism Awards. She's the only person to have won both the MFK Fisher Distinguished Writing Award from the James Beard Foundation and the MFK Fisher Award for Excellence in Culinary Writing from Les Dames d'Escoffier International. Natalie is the host of Unreserved Wine Talk, selected as one of the best drinks podcasts by the New York Times. She offers online food and wine pairing classes where she connects personally with those around the planet who share her passion for wine at nataliemaclean.com. Natalie is going to be doing a wine pairing with our book for August, Wine People by Michelle Wilgen. So for Michelle Wilgen's book club, Natalie will be doing a wine pairing. It should be lots of fun.
Hi, Natalie. Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I'm so happy to talk to you today.
I am so thrilled to be here with you, Julie. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I just finished your book last night, and it is Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. I really enjoyed this memoir, and there was so much in it. Tell me a little bit about the story behind this book.
Sure. So, from the title, Wine Witch on Fire, you might think it's about an angry woman who drinks a lot of wine and owns a lot of cats. But it's not. And it does have humor and a happy ending, spoiler alert, despite all the dismal Ds in that subtitle. But it is the story of one woman, that would be me, how I resurrected my life and career in the glamorous but sexist wine industry. And so my no good, terrible, bad vintage starts with my husband of 20 years asking for a divorce, which kind of caught me out of the blue. Mm-hmm. And then the year ends with a mob of rivals coming after my job, and that's the defamation part. And so I really had to dig deep that year to find the inner resources and strength, to reconnect with the vineyards that once brought me joy. That's why I started writing about wine. And the friends who had sustained me, I kind of wasn't talking to them about what was going on. And then my own belief in second chances. So I call Wine Witch on Fire a true coming of middle age story about transforming your life and finding love along the way.
I love that, coming of middle age, because I feel like as women, there are so many more cycles and revolutions in our lives than we have thought about before, right? So that's
exactly. There's lots of stories about the ingenue and then the lion in winter. And then there's this big gap in the middle for middle-aged, especially women's stories. And I think more of them need to be told.
I couldn't agree more. I really enjoyed that about your book because it's such a different coming of age tale when you have more experience behind you than when you're young. So there was a lot of insight there that I liked. So you came out of this time. What made you decide to write this book?
Well, for the first 5 years, I thought, I can't even look at the notes. This happened 10 years ago, but the themes and the issues are almost more relevant today. But for the first 5 years, I had to lock it away. But the story kept ricocheting around in my head. And I thought, I have to let this out, even as a private exercise in making sense of what had happened. And then as the years went by, I was hearing more and more stories from women in the wine industry, but also women friends in other industries like sport and tech and finance. And they were the same stories. The specifics, of course, were different, but the feelings and the themes and the issues were the same. So I thought, well, could my story help? I don't know. Like, it's such a different life, but I was inspired by memoirist Glennon Doyle, who said, write from a scar, not an open wound. And then the next natural question is, well, why write about it, when all the healing is done?
Yeah.
But poet Sean Doherty, I think, has the answer. And he said, because somewhere, someone out there right now has a wound in the exact shape of your words. And that really gave me goosebumps. And I thought, well, even if someone hasn't gone through a divorce, they've probably felt loneliness or the longing for love. They may not have been attacked by an online mob, but they've probably felt some sort of fear for the future or career disappointment. And I think when we read a memoir that can put words to feelings that we've had ourselves, maybe push them away, when they can be articulated like that, I think that can be healing.
I agree. And I think you did a really good job of describing a lot of the pieces, even prior to your divorce, in terms of feeling lonely in a relationship, right? That there's a sort of element there that you were figuring out as you went. And I think that's really true. Those are beautiful words from that poet, because it's true. There is a sense of, am I really doing anything by telling this story? And it's an act of faith to tell it and believe that it will be of service to someone.
I know. And we hear the words, memoirists always say, I want to share this so people feel less alone or to be seen and to be heard. But, I had to dig down to, what does that mean? Does it really help someone? But I think it can, because you're going through somebody else's story. So there's a safety element there, that it's not all of your hot buttons or your specifics, but just seeing how someone can, experience some of the same feelings you've had, walk through the flames and come out on the other side stronger, wiser, fiercer. That to me, is what a memoir can do.
Yeah, a real element of hope that, this person survived these pieces and came out on the other side, and I can too. And it is interesting how memoir is so personal until it's not. Because as soon as you write it and send it out, these readers are now consuming it, but they are going to read it through their lens, and they'll take whatever resonates with them. So yeah, that makes total sense. Ooh, I love the way you put that. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, so how did this book position yourself in your mind? Because your two previous books, kind of are humorous about drinking too much and all the things. And I like that you chose to say drinking too much instead of, addiction, especially, or alcoholism, and another term. I thought that was really good. But how did this position for you? Because you were kind of funny about drinking too much in your other books. And then now, because it was Red Wine and Drunk and Unquenchable, correct?
Exactly. Red, white, and drunk all over, but yes.
And drunk all over. Gist. That's right. I knew I was missing something. Yeah. I got stuck. But so those are your first two. And then now we're this. So how did that feel for you?
So I like that you picked up on the fact that I used drinking too much and not, as you say, addiction, or drunkenness would have been a tidier subtitle, right? Divorce, defamation, and drunkenness. But I think, I love memoirs about, I binge read memoirs like Mary Karr's and so on, about having a substance abuse disorder. But I think, especially post-pandemic, I think what's more relatable now is that we're all kind of on a spectrum. If we haven't given up drinking completely, and some of us need to do that, we go up and down. Progress is forward and backwards in terms of drinking and how much we're drinking, how much we'd like to be drinking, the way we moderate or manage our drinking. And so I really dove into that in the book. And I think, I know that early readers are saying, they really loved being a fly on the wall during my therapy sessions as I kind of wrestled with, hey, I drink for a living. I'm a wine writer. Do I just walk away from all of this? My father was an alcoholic. It runs in my family. So there's that kind of fear and concern. But my own wonderful therapist, Miranda, said, I think that might be punitive. Let's see if we can focus on harm reduction first and some techniques. And so while this isn't a self-help book, I share a lot of tips, again, that have really resonated with early readers about moderating my own consumption as a professional. And so things like, what was the thought just before the thought that said, I need a drink? And was it about stress or relaxation, enjoyment? And if it was about stress, could I find a different way to handle that? Go for a walk, take a bath, watch a show. Just that pause sometimes can break that chain of immediately, I want a drink. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's drinking too much. And you're right. My first two books I used my own over drinking or drinking habits as fodder for humor. Mm-hmm. And now I'm using my over drinking habits as, I hope, fuel for discussion on over drinking, especially among women. I mean, during the pandemic, women's over drinking soared compared to the general population. And I think there's a lot of contributing factors to that. So I think it's time to have that discussion, both in my industry. The wine industry has the highest rate of substance abuse of all professions. We don't talk about it. There's a lot of shame, but also more broadly.
Mm-hmm. You're so right. It's such a tricky subject too, because you wrote in the book about how you would read these memoirs of people with substance abuse disorders, and it's easy to think, oh, I'm not having a vodka soda at 8 a.m., so I'm good to go, right?
Exactly.
And so it's tough to have an honest conversation about that. Mm-hmm. And I really liked your therapist's approach with the harm reduction and the pause between the thought and the action, right? I mean, that's something I should probably do more in my entire life. So
we all can do it.
Right. Yes. It's amazing how therapy nuggets really apply in more than one situation, don't they?
They do. They do. And, like the whole, I'm not hiding a vodka bottle in the diaper bag, so I must be fine. Yes. But then I had to turn that, mirror on myself and say, well, are women or other people, not just women, looking at me and saying, well, look at what she drinks. I must be fine. Was I, bringing more pleasure or pain in the world? Was I being an enabler by joking so much about my drinking habits? I really had to confront myself and have a real talk. And that's part of what's in the book.
Well, and I applaud you for that, though, because I think it's a necessary conversation to have, especially because we are in the land of rosé all day, or the age of rosé all day, right? Where it is, you can't go 10 feet without advertisements, endorsements, all of these ideas. So to actually step away from that and say, is this healthy for me? Is it something that's enjoyment, or am I letting it get the best of me? I think that's so wise and hard to do for a lot of people.
It is hard to do. And, as mothers, we don't have time for a lot, and we're juggling a lot, of course.
Yes.
But the message on some wine labels seems to be that we're either babes or battle axes, so we're either reaching for brands like Little Black Dress or Stiletto, or else we're just trying to obliviate another day of exhaustion with wines like Mommy's Juice and Mommy's Time Out. And, there's lots of laugh out loud, memes. Wine mom culture is still going strong. But under that, I think there's a bitter edge of resentment. Yes. No one's thanking mom, so mom will thank herself with another drink. Mm-hmm. And, I wasn't a bystander in all of this. I was team captain. I called my glass of wine, Mommy's, at 5 p.m. especially, Mommy's little helper. It was helping me get through that arsenic hour, that time of day when your serotonin takes a natural dip and you want to take arsenic or administer it to those around you. Instead, you might go for a glass of wine.
That was an amazing term, by the way. I had never heard that. And I was like, that is so true, because those hours in a mom's day, you're just like, I'm not going to make it.
I know. And you need some sort of transition aside from a tranquilizer to sort of bridge from your busy work day to home life without, snapping at somebody.
Yes.
And I just think it comes from all of the over demands that society places on us and that we place on ourselves. Yeah. And, I had to start giving myself permission slips to stop at 5 or 6 p.m. It's like, I used to say, okay, I'll get one more productive hour in if I give myself a glass of wine, keep going on that email. It's like, oh, it's just, you have to like step back at a certain point and say, enough's enough.
Yeah. Instead of addressing or using alcohol as a Band-Aid for overwork and overdoing it, it is a question of how can I just be good to myself on the regular so I don't feel this need to escape at 5 p.m.
To tranquilize or whatever.
Yes. Although I will say I feel like that hour, no matter what, is a touch and go one. But maybe you could exercise or go on a walk or do something nice.
Just change your energy. I find just getting outside, like I don't think it's going to work, and then it does. It's like, so just trust yourself for a minute, get out, do something, and just change that focus briefly. But, even just going back to those labels that target women.
Yes.
I think there's an even deeper concern about what's happening there. Wine marketing generally does not target men the same way it targets women. The implied message with, little black dress and girls' night out is that women need a reason to have a glass of wine, whether it's girlfriends getting together, fancy occasion, or just, again, another day of exhaustion done. No one asks a man why he wants to have a drink. He has one because he wants one. And some of these wine labels and wine marketing strike me the way Virginia Slims cigarettes used to market those as torches of freedom back in the 60s.
Yes.
Or so I'm told. I'm not that old, but but it's like now it's turned to wine. And those labels that profit from powerlessness or a feeling of thanklessness, I think we need to re-examine them, especially as women, and become better consumers of wine and drinkers of wine, both in what we drink and how much we drink, because we vote with our dollars.
Yes. Ooh, I really like your take on that. That makes a lot of sense. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the orchid brain, because I thought this was a really interesting insight that you had. So I think, or that was provided really in a conversation with your therapist, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So
That's
she
right,
said,
yes.
The orchid brain is delicate, hypersensitive, and acutely self-aware, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure I have one of those too. So since understanding that about yourself, do you embrace it more? Has that made it easier to kind of identify that? Because I think the hypersensitivity and acute self-awareness can be just so tricky. It's a lot to carry.
It is. I told her I wanted a cactus brain. How could I get one of those?
May I order that? Is there a catalog like in Sky Hall? Maybe we can get it.
If only. Oh my goodness. I just, this hyper awareness, I think again is a large part of many women's existence, especially writers, but anyone, who has a sensitivity to their environment. And it's just too much coming in. Part of that is I've been officially not diagnosed, I don't know what the word is, but categorized as a super taster. So that means I have more taste buds on average, and it makes me acutely aware to everything, not just wine, which can be a good thing in tasting.
Sure.
But, the person who diagnosed this said, I'll bet you take out the tags from all of your clothing. I'll bet you drink tea, not coffee. And I bet you have thermostat wars with your family. And he was like, check, check, check. So what makes us super tasters, super noticers, or orchid brains is great in a lot of ways. It's great for writing. You pick up on all the sensory details. Your writing can be alive and rich and really, help the reader envision what's going on in your life. But in terms of everyday life, it can make for lousy socializing, when you're looking at everybody's muscle twitch and everything that they're doing. And it can go into wanting or be linked to wanting to self-medicate, to say, I need to slow down this sensory input. Give me a glass of wine. So being aware of that, to your question, really helped to just work with that and to know when I have to shut myself down in other ways, to go recharge the batteries, but not necessarily with wine.
Yeah. Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
Extreme introvert, very shy. Okay. Yeah. But I learned to perform early on. I was a dancer, Highland dancer in competitive Scottish Highland games with the kilts and the bagpipes and everything. And I came from, my mom was a single mom, a school teacher. And so we moved around a lot. So I stopped answering the door when the kids came to knock to play, but I learned how to perform and compete and, be all in performance wise. So it was either a big crowd or one-on-one with mom generally. So definitely an introvert with some social skills to cope.
Social skilled introvert. Yes.
Yes.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, though, that there is something to be said for maybe the safety of a larger group, and
Yes.
as opposed to kind of that middle ground where you're not sure if you can be fully engaged or fully disengaged, right? It sounds
Exactly.
like you chose or you preferred environments where you knew the rules and the expectations.
Exactly, Julie. That's really a good observation. And with large crowds, they're anonymous. You can't see them.
Yes.
You're not tuning in one-on-one with anyone. So it's that group of 3 or 4 to 6 that just like, okay, let me try to take a deep breath here.
I'm in my nightmare. Come on in. The water's warm.
Exactly.
Join me here.
It can be friends too, like nicest people on the planet, but it's just, you have to develop techniques for dealing with that if you're an introvert. Yeah.
But that's such a gift of therapy and kind of that self-examination and asking those questions. What works for me? What feels good? What doesn't feel good? As opposed to, like you said, let me just cope with it. And then I don't ever really get to the other side of this.
Exactly. Yeah. The self-awareness and therapy go a long way toward many things. Progress is never linear. So there's lots of like forwards and backwards, but I think it's the struggle that counts.
I really liked the way that you were so honest about that as well, in terms of finding a balance with your drinking. That it was, this isn't, I'm constantly laboring under the idea that progress can be linear. And so, setbacks can be hard. So it's good to read about that and just be reminded, like, this is how life goes, right? One step forward, 2 steps back. So
it is. And it's all wrapped up with a whole bunch of other things. This is really good therapy. Thanks, Julie, for having me into your private session here. But, the other things I deal with, which I'm sure a lot of people will, feel resonant with, but perfectionism and competitiveness. And they are like, a boa constrictor and a cobra. One will squeeze the joy of life out of you, and the other will bite you with envy. So all of these things are wrapped together. And, what a good therapist can do is untangle them and try to get down to the underlying issues. Because for me, fortunately, my overdrinking was really tied to the depression from the divorce and the anxiety from the online mobbing.
Yes.
And once I dealt with that instant need to have another drink really alleviated. Didn't go away completely. I still have to manage it, but it really, really helped.
Yeah. And that's such a gift, I think, of this book that I really appreciated, because it is easy to move through our lives on autopilot until something becomes such an issue that it's so far gone that now we have other fallout to deal with from it, as opposed to, let me ask myself these questions. Why am I doing this? Yeah. Perfectionism and competitiveness. Check and check also on Julie's personality profile as well. So I think you and I have a few things in common.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I'm getting that sense.
Yes, I'm feeling it. I wanted to ask, you write that you had lost touch with joy in the writing because of the business of production. So was writing this book a different experience for you? And what was it that made it so? And I guess, so the first question of that is, did you feel that as a result of your 2 books, or more with your reviews, or what was the production piece that sort of crushed you? And then how is this one different?
After my first 2 books were published, and they did really well, and so I was getting more and more people visiting my website. And then I got tapped into, SEO, search engine optimization, because I thought, well, let's get more people visiting the site, more people find out about the books, my online courses for food and wine pairing, mobile apps, etc. And I felt like I was slowly becoming Google's content rat, so I was trying to do articles that were optimized to get clicks and eyeballs, like the rat presses the pellet gun or whatever in the cage. But it wasn't nourishing me. I started off writing because it gave me this flow state that lots of folks talk about, that when you're writing and you're really into it, you're starting to make creative connections between things that, you've never seen before, and it's really happening and it's coming out and onto the page or the screen. That's very healing. But this SEO stuff was the opposite. It was like chasing after, another little pellet.
Yes.
It was not my higher self.
My higher self is not Google's rat. That's amazing. No. You're so right. Yes, continue. Oh my gosh.
And so getting back to writing a book again, because it was a 10-year gap between books 1, 2, then this is book 3. Mm-hmm. So I was Google's little pet for a while. And, but getting back into this long flow writing really felt healing for this orchid brain, because it was concentration. It wasn't click, 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 like, whatever.
Yes.
It was all about making these longer connections and creativity. And I just, I would stop after a writing session and feel like that my brain was healing slowly again. And it was the most wonderful thing. And actually, that's where I started. When I started writing about wine, when I got into it at the first, I didn't even want to do short form wine reviews. Like, I just wanted to do these long form narratives because I always admired the new journalists like Joan Didion and, Thomas Wolfe and so on, who sort of dove into their subject head first, experienced whatever it was, and then wrote about it. And that's what I did for my first 2 books, like Red, White, and Drunk All Over. I become a sommelier for a day, but then I was able to write about it with more depth.
Yes.
This is the same thing, except this is my life. So I definitely dove head first into it. But that writing experience, it really, I think it opened up some neural pathways that had gone dark 10 years ago.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing to hear. And that makes so much sense. There are so many parallels with the wine world too, right? Where there's the experience of wine and enjoying it and savoring it. And then there's this marketing beast and the commodification that then becomes, they shouldn't go together, but they do. And then it just sucks all the joy right out of it. So
it does. It does. Just like consuming the first glass is kind of like that sigh at the end of a long day, especially if it's about relaxation, not stress alleviation. And it's sensory, and you're smelling it, you're enjoying it, you're feeling it going down into your body. And glass 2 is, okay, well, this is now I'm relaxed. But as you keep progressing, if you do, it becomes less about enjoyment and it's just about oblivion. And you disconnect from yourself. Like through wine and alcohol, I was, separating my mind from my body. As a dancer, I grew up always connected with my body. That's how I expressed myself.
Yeah.
But the wine was just disconnecting the two, and I had to come back and bring it full circle and feel connected again.
You're reminding me, I wrote a memoir that's about a period where I was deeply depressed. And when I was at the peak of kind of my anxiety, even having a glass of wine it wasn't enjoyable because I was not in my body. Right. And it's such an interesting thing that you're talking about too, where that connection to our bodies is so important and so fundamental. And once we lose that, it's a slippery slope.
We're not a whole person anymore. We're just living in our heads. And that's very easy for people who love writing and reading.
Yes.
I mean, it's glorious sometimes to live in your head, but not all the time. You've got to come back down from the attic of your mind, back down into the sensual part of yourself and feel that fusion that makes a whole person.
Yes. Oh, you're exactly right. I want to hear about the book club guide that you've created for this memoir, because I think just even the conversation we're having, I think this is going to bring so much opportunity for people to talk. This would be a great book club book. So
thank you.
Tell me about the guide.
Okay. So it is free and downloadable from winewitchonfire.com/guide. And it's quite substantial because it's actually a big part of the book that got taken out because someone wasn't sticking to word count guidelines.
Editors, man, they're so pesky. Jeez.
But it was kind of a debate because at the end of each chapter in the memoir, I was recommending wines to kind of pair with the themes and so on. So all of that came out, and it's now in this free guide. So not only do you get lots of wines to pair, not just with my book, but lots of other books, but you get tips on how to organize an informal tasting with friends, even if you don't have a book club. But I hear a lot of book clubs are about the wine sometimes more than the book.
Indeed.
But there are also lots of discussion questions. So even if, you haven't yet read the book, I think the discussion questions will spark a lot of debate with, among your friends or your book club members. And it's things like, what do you think about the way wine is marketed to women? How do we deal with trauma? How do you feel about your own wine consumption? I mean, you don't have to get the gold star and answer every question, but they're there, and they're meaty questions that I was discussing with my own girlfriends at the time and while writing this book. And it was unbelievable how the stories just poured out once I opened myself to what was going on in my life and these really hard questions that I was tackling. The stories just came flooding back, and they're flooding back from readers too. I mean, it gives me goosebumps because I got an email the other day from a woman who said, my husband hit the bottle pretty hard during the pandemic because we lost our adult son. He took his own life. And I credit your book for him getting back on track with, moderating his consumption. And again, I don't claim this to be a self-help book, but that just moves me. Like, that alone is worth everything. And so there's lots of questions that will spark that debate. Even if you're not in a trauma yourself.
Yes,
but I think, we've all had some experiences along the road that will resonate. So I think people will really enjoy the book club guide.
Oh, well, it's perfectly timed. Where is the best place to purchase this book? Where can we find it?
So it is in bookstores as of June 6th in the US and elsewhere. Came out a little earlier in Canada, May 9th. But you can go to winewitchonfire.com because there's links to all the retailers. You can order it online if you can't find it in your bookstore. I have juicy bonuses like online wine tastings and so on for those who purchase the book. And I'm happy to send signed book plates to anyone who does that if you want to make it a gift.
Oh, I love it. Well, Natalie, thank you for the time, for your insight, for the conversation. This was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed this.
Julie, I think we're going to have a glass of wine together someday.
I accept.
Okay.
It's on the calendar. Thank you.
I really enjoyed this.
Me too.
It was wonderful.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.